start recording and I'm going to go live, which is perfect because we have Pushkar who just joined.
Oh,
How you
hi
doing,
everyone.
Pushkar? How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
Great. I hope my audio is okay.
It sounds good. Sounds
Great.
good. Cool. All right, let's try this again. Sorry for that false start there. But now we are live on Facebook and we're recording this for people who aren't actually able to make it. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen real quick. No, that's not the right screen. Man, I'm sorry. There we go. Here we have it. Okay. So again, thank you all for joining us on Earth Day. It's incredible to be here. It's incredible to have you here. My name is Jen DeMeo. I'm director of Green Team Academy, and we empower everyday people to be the change. We do this through a 90-day Passion to Action challenge, where we help teams launch eco initiatives and in their areas. Last year, we had 75 teams join from 28 different countries. We planted 150,000 trees, cleaned up, held 40 cleanup events, removed 48 tons of rubbish from waterways, started 130 gardens, 3 urban gardens, and a bunch more. This is a great challenge if you want to build camaraderie, have fun, build community while making an impact. So if you would like to sign up to join 2022's International Climate Action Challenge, please go over climateactionchallenge.net and sign up for the mailing list. The registration won't open until the end of May, but if you're on the mailing list, you won't miss any notifications. If you were here for yesterday's event, it was really cool. We had 2 of our previous challengers come on, and they were talking about the collaborations that they're working on now. So it's really cool how connected, how easy it makes. This challenge makes it easy for people to connect. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. It's a great way to kind of collaborate on a common ground. So within the organization, we're looking for a couple of volunteers. So if you have any social media, volunteer coordination, or project management skills, please greenteamacademy.org/volunteer, fill out an application because we would love to get you on the team. And this is really exciting. We are hosting an Eco Impact Jumpstarter session on May 4th. I will refrain from the Star Wars jokes, but that was actually why I picked that date. Anyway, this session is going to be introducing a program that we're launching in 2023 that was inspired by an international corporation that we're working with right now, where we were able to train a core team on how to coordinate the 90-day challenge within their organization. So if you have a business, organization, educational facility, or just want to figure out a way to build community while making an impact and having fun, please join us for this session. You will not be sorry that you did. We'll be going over the Climate Action Challenge, what it would look like to coordinate your own challenge, and you'll even get some materials that will help you kind of understand a little bit better. So yes, really looking forward to this one. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to our partners. I hope that everybody received their World's Littlest Book on Climate when they registered for this event. It's packed with information. It's a great little read. And then we have Colorado Environmental Film Festival, Elevation Global Solutions, Glow and Gather, Team Great Golden, Trinity Forestry Services, which they are the group that makes it possible for us to donate a tree for every $25 that you donate. So big shout out to them. Huge shout out to Joan Gregerson with her Climate Action Homes podcast. Joan is the founder of this organization, so none of us would be here today without her. So please go support that podcast. And then Climate Reality Project. One of our speakers who helped coordinate this event is a climate reality leader. Actually, Pushkar, since Salia isn't here, would you want to kind of give a little introduction of Climate Reality Project?
Yes, definitely. Would love to do that.
Awesome. Then I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. So basically, with the climate reality project, I think one of the main things that is happening is that it's a big community that is getting built of climate reality leaders who are backed up with a lot of the scientific data in terms of what is impacting climate change and how it is impacting, life on Earth as we know it to be, and the impact that it brings in on our daily livelihoods, be it, let's say, now. The Arctic and the Antarctic melting of the snow that is happening in the glaciers, and which is then going to affect the landmass. So a lot of people might not even be aware, but because of the way the oceans are rising and the climate is changing globally. In fact, one of the biggest case study was Kiribati Island, which is one of the only nation and first nation which had to buy land from other nations to be able to house its people because the nation was going under it. The island, it's an island nation and it's getting submerged under the sea. So you can imagine that there's so much of impact that is happening, and the climate reality program is about bringing in that awareness, and it is a people's movement. So it's all about educating and empowering the people to bring about a change. Either it is working with the government or working on your own, but it's a big community. So you're never alone fighting this battle. And the key thing is, the key message that I would like to pass on is that on this Earth Day, it's all of us together in this fight towards, like climate change and the impacts that it is bringing in. So that's the background about the climate reality project, and more than welcome to join in. It's a big, big community, and it's ever growing year on year. So I'm hoping that a lot of people are able to join in and become a part of that change. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much for that, Pushkar. Yeah, that's so I'm not sure. Yeah, that's part of the reason why climate reality and Green Team Academy go together so well. It's like if you want to understand what's happening and truly be able to make a difference, like it equips you with the knowledge that you need to move forward. And then ideally joining Green Team Academy will empower you to make the moves, to make the changes that need to be made. So it's very honored to be partnering with Climate Reality Project. And thank you so much for the introduction to it, Pushkar. I appreciate that. So without further ado, we will introduce our first speaker, who is Franziska Elmer. She's the scientific project manager at Seafield Solutions and research fellow at School for Field Studies, as well as an international climate action challenger. And she will be talking on oceanic carbon removal. So yeah, take it away, Franziska.
Thank you so much. I'll share my screen as I have a presentation prepared. So today it's Earth Day. So I want to talk to you about the ocean because more than 70% of our planet Earth is actually the ocean. So it is a blue planet. And I'm going to talk about how the ocean is impacted by climate change and how it actually can help us to capture the carbon that we have put into the atmosphere. So first of all, how is the ocean impacted? The first big impact on the ocean is thermal stress. So about 93% of the heat caused by climate change is absorbed by the ocean, which is a really good news for the atmosphere and for us, as it means that the atmosphere is not heating up as fast as if there wasn't any ocean. But it's also bad news because this accelerates the sea level rise. You have warmer water, you have more ice melting. It intensifies marine heat waves. So since 1998, we have mass coral bleaching events. Also, during the heat wave we had on the Pacific, coast in Canada and the US, there was also a marine heat wave going with it, which killed a lot of clams and shellfish from what I know. But of course, we didn't really talk as much about the marine heat wave as we did about the one on land. It makes storms more powerful as the water heats up, and that impacts all the coastal communities that then get hit by these storms. It also interrupts the mixing between the deeper water and the top water as it becomes more stratified. And that's really dangerous because it means that some parts of the ocean become deoxygenated, so they have no oxygen there and they become a dead zone where nothing can live. There's changes in ocean currents. One of the things I study is an algae called sargassum. And the reason that we now have huge amounts of this coming to the beaches in Africa and the entire Caribbean, making it a natural hazard and a really, really big problem is because the ocean currents, the Northern Atlantic Oscillation has slowed down for several months in 2011, and the sargassum escaped from the Sargasso Sea and came into a different area where it started blooming. We also have the possibility that the jet stream, what is it called? The Gulf Stream is shutting down due to climate change. So these things can have huge impacts on our lives. And then some animals are migrating poleward, and there, of course, they interact with the animals who normally live in those areas and may cause disturbance in the ecosystem there because there's a newcomer that shouldn't be there. The other impact on climate change is ocean acidification. So oceans absorb about 30% of the CO2 released to the atmosphere. This also means that as we are reducing the CO2 in the atmosphere, that CO2 will be released again from the ocean back to the atmosphere. So there's a constant balance. With having more CO2 in the atmosphere, it means that the acidity of the ocean increases. So the pH goes down. As you can see in the graphic, it doesn't look like much. It's a bit over 8 before and a bit under 8 after. But in pH, that is a huge difference. And it affects a lot of animals. There's a lot of animals in the ocean that use calcium carbonate to make shells and skeletons. That includes corals, shellfish, urchins, some plankton. And they, with fewer carbon ions in the water due to the decreased pH, there will be less of them and they will be smaller because it takes a lot more effort to build their skeletons. And that affects then the whole food chain that they are supporting, especially the planktons. And there's many unknowns of what this will actually do to the ocean. And if you look at this graphic that shows the impact on flora and fauna at different degrees, you can see that the first 3 up to 3 degrees are all marine. So we have first that a lot of coral reefs are disappearing and already at 1.5, 9 out of 10. At 2 degrees, all coral reefs are disappearing. Then at 3 degrees, it's very likely that the marine ecosystems completely collapse. It isn't until 4 degrees that we are losing animal and plant species and have a really huge impact on land. By that time, our oceans are already dead. So really the ocean is the first one to feel the impacts of climate change, or one of the first ones. Of course, there's a lot of other impacts as well. So what can we do against climate change? Let's get to the action part. This is a graphic of the IPCC report, Working Group 3, that came out 2 weeks ago. And you can see there's 3 scenarios that they modeled on how we can decrease our emissions. The red scenario is the scenario of keeping going as we want to, as we are now, not as we want to, but as we are now with the policies we have now. And looking at these scenarios, there is the need for negative emissions in there, so for pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. If we want to stay under 2 degrees, they say we have to pull between 0 and 300 gigatons of carbon out of the atmosphere cumulative by 2100. If we want to return to 1.5 after a high overshoot, it's 60 to 680. And if we want to stay at 1.5, it's 0 to 660. Those are big ranges. And of course, there's also zeros in there. But the average for all of them is, of course, a positive number where we have to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And I'm asking you, is 1.5 Celsius really enough? To me, it doesn't make sense. We are saying now climate change is happening now. It is a problem now. And at the same time, we say, we can make it a bigger problem and just stay in that stage rather than go back to how it was before we had the climate change problem. So at the moment, we're at about 1.2 degrees warming, and it's already unsafe for hundreds of millions of people, as well as for other forms of life, such as the coral reefs. So this is not really a state we want to stay in. We want to get better than what we have right now. I'm also worried that at 1.5 degrees, there is the chance that we could already exceed tipping points we may already have now. And then if we exceed these tipping points, there will be natural systems that are spewing out carbon into the atmosphere, or where the ice is melting, even if we stop all our carbon emissions. And we are locked in for a runaway climate change that we cannot control anymore. So really, the less emissions we can have, the better. And at 1.5, there's enormous negative impacts on the ocean, especially on the coral reefs, which is the ecosystem I used to study. So for me, 1.5 is not enough. It may be the only thing we can do. We may already be too late to get there, but we should aim for more, especially long term. And that's where we get up onto cleanup. So when you have pollution, there's two things you can do. You can avoid the pollution and you can clean up the pollution. And CO2 is still not really treated like a pollutant, maybe because we cannot see it. And we hardly ever talk about cleaning up the 200 years of polluting we have done, which is needed to restore the ocean and the climate to get back to 280 ppm or 350 ppm, while we are currently at 420 ppm. Why aren't we talking about this that much? Because the messaging is difficult. When we talk about cleanup of CO2, this is normally referred to as an offset, and then people often have negative thoughts about it and say, well, if you are offsetting your emissions, you are not going to reduce them. There has been new messaging around it saying reduce first, offset the rest, but it hasn't really caught on. Then people question if the offset would have actually happened if the money would have not been given. So if the money given actually leads to an extra offset, or if that would have happened anyways. And there is sometimes negative impact on local communities with some of the projects. There are agencies that give standards out to make sure that these two things are met, or no negative impacts and additionality. But of course, some people are critical towards if those standards are really good enough. Funnily enough, with plastics, we have the opposite problem. With the plastic pollution, we are all about cleanup. We love to clean up the plastic, and we hardly ever think about reduction. So it seems weird to me that when we talk about cleaning up CO2, we don't have the same mindset as when we talk about cleaning plastics, probably because we can't see it. But we should really also say the same thing about cleaning up CO2, that it is needed. Nobody says to you when you go to a beach cleanup, but does that mean you are still going to use a Starbucks cup if you do beach cleanups instead? No. So really, with the plastic situation, we have to talk more about reduction and do more there, and have a balance of doing both. And with CO2, we have to talk more about cleanup and have a balance of reduction and cleanup in terms of the actions we want to take. So why is the ocean good for cleaning up the CO2 or carbon dioxide removal? First of all, there is a large carbon pump that is already naturally happening in the ocean. And I'll show you a bit more in the following video. And there's 50 times more carbon on the ocean floor than in the atmosphere. So there is a lot of capacity to take what is in the atmosphere down to the ocean floor without it having a negative impact per se. We still have to study the impacts, but it seems like it is possible that it can have not a negative impact. As I said earlier, 70% of our planet is the ocean. There is just a lot of space. And it doesn't make sense to focus just on the 30% that is land to deal with our problems. And there's a lot less conflict because people aren't really using the ocean as much as they're using land. So there's less conflicts of what we want to do with an acre of ocean than there is with an acre of land. And a lot of the methods, such as growing algae, actually has a lot of co-benefits for the ocean ecosystem and fisheries because it provides habitat for all kinds of animals and fish and leads to a really thriving ecosystem. So I'm going to show a video because the video explains the different methods of ocean carbon dioxide removal much better than I can do.
Over the past 200 years, we have built a globalized economy based on fossil fuels and added 555 billion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. The ocean has absorbed more than a quarter of this carbon, thereby increasing seawater acidity by 30%. Land is also a significant carbon sink. However, half of our CO2 emissions remain in the atmosphere, causing a carbon traffic jam that's pushing our climate towards dangerous new conditions. This CO2 must urgently be removed, and the ocean, with its enormous volume and natural carbon pumps, might provide the key. CO2 diffuses into the surface layer of the ocean whenever it is more abundant in the air than in the water. Once dissolved, powerful carbon pumps remove CO2 from the surface, pulling yet more of it into the ocean. Ocean currents move CO2-saturated surface waters poleward, where they cool and sink, pulling our emissions into the deep ocean, where they can remain isolated for thousands of years. Over geologic timescales, weathering of rock washes alkaline molecules into the ocean, thereby converting dissolved CO2 into bicarbonate and carbonate forms. This natural alkalinity allows the ocean to take up more CO2 without further increasing ocean acidity. On much shorter timescales, primary producers photosynthesize, using sunlight and nutrients to turn dissolved CO2 into organic carbon that fuels the food web. As organisms feed on one another and trillions of microbes digest even the smallest of particles, most organic carbon is rapidly recycled back into CO2. However, a small fraction of organic carbon escapes the food web and is sequestered in the ocean. This includes organic matter that sinks into the deep ocean or is structurally so complex that it becomes inaccessible to microbes and is sequestered in the ocean for thousands of years. Organic carbon also gets trapped in coastal soils by salt marshes, mangrove forests, and seagrass meadows. Alone, the ocean's carbon pumps are too slow to reverse climate change. However, with research and innovation, we might be able to give these natural pumps a boost and avert the worst consequences of climate change. For example, large-scale seaweed farming or ranching of free-floating sargassum can remove the carbon stored in plant biomass by sinking it to the ocean floor or by locking it up in long-lived bioproducts. In nutrient-poor waters, the export of carbon to the deep ocean could be boosted by artificial fertilization of phytoplankton, either directly with the help of ships or planes, or by artificial upwelling of deeper nutrient-rich waters. Such fertilization could also enhance the growth of seaweed. Protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems would prevent emissions associated with ecosystem degradation and can increase storage of organic carbon in marine soils. Ocean alkalinity can be enhanced in a number of ways, thereby increasing the ocean's absorptive capacity for CO2 and counteracting ocean acidification. Proposed approaches include the direct addition of alkaline minerals to beaches or the open ocean, accelerated weathering of limestone or silicate rock in controlled reactors or electrochemical seawater treatment facilities. Finally, liquid CO2 from emissions captured on land could be stored in subsurface geological formations or in the deep ocean. It has even been proposed to increase water density at the poles to accelerate the downward transport of CO2 to the deep ocean. Some of these approaches might have a real shot at sequestering billions of tons of CO2. Their evaluation, in terms of efficacy, environmental impacts and cost, field testing and potentially large-scale deployment will require multi-sectoral collaboration, innovation, and an enabling governance system. Join the conversation at oceancdr.net.
Okay. Let me get out of this. No, sorry. 1 second. There we go. So as you saw, there's a lot of different ways that we can use the ocean to draw down carbon, but there's a lot of challenges because we haven't researched these ways a lot. So there needs to be a lot of research, which needs funding, and it is underfunded. Most funding towards climate stuff doesn't go towards ocean. And I'm sure that most of you have not heard about these solutions before, which just shows that society and policymakers know very little about this. And therefore, it's also hard to get funding and research done if nobody actually is even aware of it. So this is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry if it was a bit longer. I just wanted, I'm looking forward to your questions, especially on how to use seaweed, because that's what I specialize in for Ocean CDR. And I want to remind you that when you talk about Earth, don't forget about the ocean. And this is a picture of our planet looked at from the side of the Pacific that just shows or gives an example of how much of our planet is actually ocean. And we should not forget talking about it.
That was fantastic, Franziska. Thank you so much. And that picture at the end was was very impactful because yes, I know that the Earth is 70% water, but I've never seen a picture from that angle before. It really makes sense to utilize it if we're able to remove carbon in that way. So thank you, because like you said, I don't think a lot of people are aware of that even being an option. So very, very awesome. Now I'll introduce our second speaker, Pushkar Pradhan. He's the CEO of EcoSense Enviro and a climate reality leader. And he's going to be talking on carbon management, different tools and strategies.
Great, thank you, Jen, for the introduction and amazing presentation by Dr. Franziska. I think it's an eye-opener. We all know that there are different carbon sinks that we talk about, the oceans, the mangroves, the wetlands, and the forest that is there, the soil. I think on this earth day, I think we all need to be able to take that pledge that we are going to do all in our all that is in our capacity to ensure that this carbon sinks are taken care of, and then we are able to like change our lifestyle in a different way to ensure that we are not the ones contributing it, and at the same time we are ensuring that how do we reduce the carbon emissions around, how is it that we can contribute. So I believe that each one of us can play a big role in our own way, and collectively of course there's going to be a huge impact. So with that, I'm Pushkar, and I'm going to be talking today about carbon tools and mitigation strategies, more in terms of like trying to see how and what we can do in terms of reducing carbon emissions, but basically starting with essentially understanding what exactly carbon emissions are, what are the things that we need to take into consideration, I'll also talk about a bit on the business opportunities available. I think we need to make it practical if we have to, make it more sustainable also in that sense. So I have my startup ecosense, and we are looking at how can we bring about, create a better world and sustainable world for our future generations by tackling the issues related to climate change. Without much ado, I think I'll be focusing more in terms of what exactly we talk about when we talk about climate change and how it is impacting us, right? So it's quite key to understand that we are looking at different things in terms of the greenhouse gases. And you'll see on the right hand side, I have mentioned the 6 greenhouse gases which contribute towards, which are part of the things which, impact the way the climate warming or the global warming is happening. And for the simplicity's sake, we always see carbon emissions, but essentially all of these gases, they are equivalently converted to a CO2 emission, which is why all the greenhouse gases are actually combined and represented as if it's a carbon emission thing. So which is why carbon emissions, because they're the biggest chunk of the gas which emits the most of the, part of the emission thing, which is why all of these gases are expressed in the impact of GHG in terms of CO2. Now, this slide with Dr. Francisca also was talking about a similar thing, that with the current trend that we are going, and if we do not make any changes to the way we are conducting our business and our day-to-day life, then we'll be looking at global temperature rise almost up to 5 degrees centigrade, and that is going to be devastating. And currently where we are with the current policies that we are talking about, and this is all taking into account what is as part of the earlier Kyoto protocols in the Paris Agreement and with the recently concluded COP26, the Glasgow event that happened. And where we need to be to avoid any harmful changes of climate impact. And we talk about 1.5 degrees, and I agree with Dr. Francisca. I think 1.5 degrees is like very, being realistic in some way. But at the same time, we need to see how lower can we get, because 1.5 degree itself is quite devastating for a lot of the life forms, and the way we know, the ecosystem is going to be impacted in different ways. Right. So when we look at the greenhouse gases, we classify these greenhouse gases into 3 main categories: the scope 1, the scope 2, and the scope 3. Right, scope 1 is something which is directly impacting, let's say, under the control of the company that it is, which are included. Because we talk about a lot on the corporate side, because companies are the ones who are into manufacturing and all, and they are the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases. Of course, as an individual, our day-to-day lifestyle also impacted a bit, but then the impact is much lower as compared to what comes out from any manufacturing or production activity that happens. So essentially, we classify into scope 1, 2, 3. Scope 1, as I was mentioning about earlier, is all the direct emissions that are coming from sources that are controlled by the company. Yeah. So if I'm, let's say, buying an diesel or let's say power from a company for operating delivery trucks, as in this example, which are owned by the company, then that's considered like a scope 1 emission. Scope 2 emissions are considered like something which is indirect, right? So it's not in my control, but I'm still going to be buying it from somewhere else. So I'm going to buy electricity from a third-party provider. And scope 3 emissions are all the indirect emissions which are not really in control of the company. And if you look at this particular image, I think this talks about 2 parts of the scope 3, right? So category 1 to category 8. Now, within scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, there are different categories of emission factors that are there. Scope 3 is category 1 to 8, which is the upstream, and scope 3 downstream is category 9 to 15. So that's how they classify that to be when we are actually doing the measurements of the carbons and carbon emissions, and like trying to understand what is a emission for a particular company or its operations in that sense. So to make it simple, I think there are 2 key questions that we need to always ask, right? One of the question is, does my company own the source of emissions? And the second question would be, are the emissions in question directly produced by my company? So if you answer this type of questions, right, these two questions, you'll be able to understand a bit more clearer in what is exactly scope 1, 2, and 3. And of course, if more information is required, we can, of course, there's a lot of information available on the net. At the same time, if anyone wants any further details, very happy to share what exactly all the scope 1, 2, and 3, what are the subcategories involved in there. Because I think it's good to understand what all contributes to this different scopes that we talk about. So if we talk about carbon neutral and net zero carbon, and very high level, like carbon neutral is something where you're going to be buying enough carbon credits to or support any of the renewable energy projects to offset your emissions. Yeah. And net zero is like something where you're going to be reducing the number of flights as much as possible, or you're going to be investing in projects that remove the emissions produced by any of the flights that you take. Because essentially, just think about it this way, that any company for that matter is going to continue business doing business, right? Let's say they're generating 100 gigatons of carbon emission in a particular year, and that's quite high, but let's say 100 metric ton of carbon emission in a year. But then if they make changes to their operations and processes, they're still going to be emitting, let's say 80 metric ton of carbon. But that would mean that they still are emitting. It's not that it's going to get to net zero. So how do you get to net zero? How do you become carbon neutral? There are different things and approaches and strategies that are there. So I'll talk a bit about that as well. And why do we need to do all this is because to make it sustainable. But when we talk about sustainability, what exactly is sustainability? I mean, like everyone, we talk about so many things on sustainability front, and everyone has a very different definition of what sustainability means for them. And this is a definition which is universal. This is one of the definition which is also coined by UN, I believe. So they talk about sustainable development is any development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. If you think about it, it's quite huge. It's quite vast and expansive. It covers a lot of the different areas, and it actually nails it in terms of what really is sustainability. Right. So instead of having any vague definitions or vague understanding of it, I think this is what it is. We cannot and we should not compromise the ability of future generations by, recklessly using resources and recklessly even like throwing things around, because that's what is actually contributing to all of that. So it's all about creating a more awareness about what is happening and how do we consciously tackle each of these problems that we are facing. So from a business perspective, I think a few of the things that come into mind is like lower emission obviously saves money. Yeah, we have got into this capitalist mentality that we always look at profits and we do not consider any other impact. And that is changing a lot with a lot of the things that are, people are getting aware about what exactly is impacting them, because they're seeing the impacts of climate change. They're seeing how it is affecting their day-to-day lives. Simple things like food and basic goods, the cost is going up. There is a supply chain disruption that happens with any climate changes that happen anywhere else, right? A big agricultural country, for example, having a huge climate impact would not be able to feed the rest of the world, and that is what affects the supply chain, and also the cost of the food and basic material would go up. So all in all, looking at different areas around it, climate change impacts us, everyone, each one of us in different ways. So the question is, we know that, okay, this is impacting, this is affecting us, but then what are we going to do, and how are we going to manage our emissions? So this was one of the thing one of the slide and flow that I came across with SGX, the Singapore Exchange, where they look about credible decarbonization and how does the transition has to happen. So the first thing that has to happen whenever we are looking at managing our emissions from a corporate perspective is to be able to measure. If you are able to measure, then you are able to address it in a better way, right? Once you measure it, the second step would be to be able to set emission reduction targets according to whatever the mitigation hierarchy and the key steps that are there. And here I would also like to just quickly mention about SBTI, the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So, like setting up targets, reduction targets, which are science-based. Third part step would be to reduce the absolute emissions by optimizing the operations and changing the way we do our business. Fourth would be to neutralize and avoid residual emissions in the company's supply chain. Fifth would be by like compensating year on year to prevent reduction or eliminate greenhouse gases by being partaking in any of the sequestration and offsetting projects. And then finally disclosing it. Why disclosing is very important is because then it becomes more transparent and like creates a sort of an accountability model for everyone, for the stakeholders as well as for the business community. So question is, how can you start and how can we help? There are a lot of things that are there. I mean, some tool about like carbon measurement. So we always look at how do we start measuring it? How do we look at analyzing doing the life cycle assessment for any sort of project and doing the carbon assessment. Once you have a measurement of the emissions that you're doing, the second step would be to start looking at mitigation. So mitigation could be either avoiding, could be reducing, or could be even trying to come up with strategies to be from a individual or team perspective, or even from the business perspective. And then the finally would be sequestration and offsetting projects. So nature-based solutions, and even like looking at buying carbon credits, like a simple thing in terms of like going to the registry and picking up the carbon credits. I mean, those are the type of decarbonization things that come in play. But all in all, why do we need to do that? And this is one of the key things that we need to address with all of the businesses. A lot of businesses think that, okay, this is going to be something which is going to add more capex for me, or things that are the why do I need to do? I'm not here to do charity. I'm here to do business. But if you look at the carbon emissions, there is a clear thing in terms of an ROI for the business, because it helps you to identify your areas of waste. It helps you to reduce the waste, and in terms reduce your cost, which you would otherwise pay. There are new business opportunities and contracts that come in play here. It also positions you as a low carbon business, and with that you can actually access to green financing. So one of the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, like, let's say the green financing, the green loans that come in play. If you're able to meet some of the KPIs for reduction, then you could get a reduced rate of interest on the loans that you're taking, and that's a huge thing. I mean, like, businesses, when they look at loans and cumulatively, it actually comes out to be quite a lot. But all in all, even after while we are doing all of these, it also helps to attract talent and retain the current employees, because employees also are very much appreciative of the sustainability initiatives that a company would take up. So it's a win-win situation for a business, and that's what we should be highlighting more about. And when we talk about lower emissions, the general issues that I mentioned about, that it is sometimes complex. You have to make a lot of process changes, structural changes, or there might be a lot of capex investment and things like that. I believe it's nothing like that. The first step that you need to take up here is to take the first step. I mean, that's the main thing. Keep it simple. Start at one place, and then when you start, starting look at measuring like mitigation and all, that's when you start building on your small successes. And once you get a more hang of like how it is, how is it that you can keep bringing the changes, that's when you start growing the system and raising your game to start mitigating and offsetting the emissions that you're making. And there are different ways you can do that, is by also educating, inspiring action, by encouraging climate conscious choices on a personal level and even from a corporate perspective, and also enabling people to be able to contribute through direct donations or loyalty point redemptions. There are lots of ways you can engage the different players in the ecosystem to be a part of this type of strategies. So a few things, just a few tips and tricks in terms of how you can reduce carbon footprint, both from individual as well as from the corporate perspectives. By transport, taking more of public transport. Wastage would be reducing the wastage that is there, or creating wastage, being very eco-conscious about what you're buying and stuff like that. On the energy front, you could be, like simple things, turn off the light when you're going out, go for more energy saving sort of equipments, renewable energy is another thing to tap in. And on the general side, I just mentioned about the like optimizing office equipment, energy efficient machines and things like that, which we are seeing a lot. But I think it's more about making it more eco-conscious and making a very conscious decision of uh, taking the first step here. Right. So I'm just going to jump on to the use case that we talk about. Like, for example, when we roll out some of the solutions, and the reason I'm sharing this is to be able to get something thinking, because there are a lot of business opportunities available here, right, for everyone in there. And because we come from a capitalist mindset, so we need to make it think in some way that how can we leverage this type of a thing that is happening now and make it work such that we are able to take care of nature, Mother Earth, as well as also be able to, like make it more sustainable from a scientific, from a financial perspective. So one of the use cases we talked about is like, let's say even airlines. We have a lot of places that, the airline industry, when the emissions that happen, when you're booking a ticket, it could be simple things like how much are your carbon footprint and then offsetting it, but also creating sort of an interactive thing on every airport, that there could be digital kiosk where you could put in your QRs and stuff like that to get people to interact and understand what is carbon emissions, what is climate change, how is it impacting them. And at the next step would be to get them to contribute towards some of these projects by donations or whatever. And it's also about creating an impact and showcasing that, okay, this is what we are doing. So that is the way you could, like simulate interest and also awareness from amongst the people. And nature-based solutions, we'll talk a lot about different ways, but I feel that when we look at carbon offsetting projects, right? Nature, there's nothing to beat like what nature-based solutions are, because they're very sustainable. These are like natural. We have to look at how we're going to be restoring the forest and things like that, because we know that oceans, the land, the mangroves, the wetlands, all of these are like huge carbon sinks, and there's nothing that is going to replace it artificially. So I believe that nature-based solutions definitely something that we should be tackling. But at the same time, just keep in mind that whenever you're going with this, always ensure that you're involving the indigenous community, because without their involvement, I've seen a lot of places that they do a lot of tree plantations, but once a tree is planted, believe me, the 80% of the saplings that are planted actually die off because they're not taken care of. So to make it more sustainable and long lasting, I think that's where the impact has to come in. You have to involve the indigenous community, and every plantation has to be done considering the local ecosystem, the climate around over there, and the availability of land and the water resource tables and etc. So think about a lot of the things, make it very scientific. I think it's a big opportunity and big change that we can bring in by looking at things in a very holistic way, rather than just saying that, okay, I'm going to just do a plantation of a tree in a particular remote area. And why this required is because when we work with corporates, I think it's also about again bringing that capitalist mentality over here. But the fact of the matter is that when we are looking at offsetting, you have to look at certain criteria of what actually is a carbon offset and what is a carbon credit, which can be then put on the registry, because it has to be real, it has to be quantified, it has to be permanent, additional, verified, and has to have co-benefits with no negative consequences, right? Because these are the main overarching criteria under which a lot of these nature-based solutions can work, and which is exactly what we need to be talking about when we uptake any carbon offset project for that matter. So I'm just going to talk about like the types of emission reduction projects that like are in vogue. So forestry conservation I mentioned about. There are community projects that can be done. There could be like simple things like buying carbon credits from the registry, and it's a huge market that is coming out to be, right? So, but always put it that people have to do their due diligence. You cannot just go ahead blindly and buy the carbon credits, because you need to know where these carbon credits are coming from, who's the verifier, whether are they really genuine, and they're not being double accounted in any way. And the other ways of doing it is by investing into clean energy, renewable energy like solar, windmills, biogas projects, or even waste to energy projects that are there. So there's a different way of calculating it and all. But there are different ways in terms of how we can actually partake in terms of emission reduction projects. So all in all, in this particular session, which we have been talking about, I wanted to talk about like what is carbon emissions about, what exactly constitutes it, what are the ways you can take it up, like for example, measuring, mitigation, and offsetting. I also spoke about the business opportunities that can be tapped in. There are renewable energy projects that can be taken up. There are EVs, electric vehicles that are coming in. So huge opportunities for all of us to get involved and bring about that change. And then the final stage was the offsetting part. So there are solutions in terms of how we can, like partake in terms of reducing the emissions or even helping to offset or sequester some of the carbon emissions around. So having said that, I think that's all I had to present for today. And I'm really happy to take up any questions that you might have. And yeah, look forward to talking with all of you further. Thank you. So back to you, Jen. I hope I was able to stick to my time and I didn't exceed it too much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Pushkar. That was great. And I think the ownership of emissions, like there were a bunch of things in there that I think it would be great to discuss. We are running a little bit behind on time though, so I'm just gonna go jump in and introduce our final speaker for today, Salia Khalid. She's a biochemist from Care to People Association Denmark, and also a climate reality leader. And she's gonna be talking about solid waste in our world.
So yeah, hello everyone, hello Jen, hello Pushkar, hello to all of the participants as well. I hope everyone is doing great, and today is the Earth Day actually, so happy Earth Day to everyone. I hope you have done like a bit or small activities to serve the world actually. This is what we need to do. We need to serve the Earth. So let's start for my part of presentation. My name is Saliha Khalid. As Jane already mentioned, a brief introduction about myself. I'm a biochemist at Care to People Association Denmark, and I'm a climate reality leader as well. So I'm here as a panelist to represent climate reality project. The topic for today we are going to discuss is about the solid waste in our world. So as we are gathered here from different parts of the world, we have panelists, we have participants from different parts of the world. This is actually what we have planned to do. We are collecting people from different parts of the world to serve the earth. So starting towards solid waste. Every year, an estimate of 1.2 billion tons of solid waste is collected worldwide and decay the organic component solid waste, which is about 5% of the global greenhouse effect. As the solid waste, we see the trash everywhere. In some of the countries, some of the parts of the countries are very, very polluted, unfortunately. And we see trash everywhere, the solid waste everywhere. So solid waste is the emerging problem for the developing countries and also for the non-developing countries or the progressing countries. Actually, where the solid waste is coming from, solid waste is actually coming from the developed countries, and it is shifted towards the developing countries. So most of the countries recycle about 20% of the solid waste, and high income countries perform a little better with the average recycling amount, which is about 35%, a bit closer to 20%. But this is happening in the developed countries. And also if we are talking about the solid waste, then we must be like focusing about the organic decay and the different process of decaying the solid waste. So the solid waste is responsible for about 5% of global greenhouse gas emission, which is the most major and serious issue right now. We need to focus on the greenhouse effects. Also, the burning amount of solid waste is also increasing. The global annual waste generated in the project is to increase by 70% between 2018 to 2050. It is the prediction, unless if we are not focusing about the solid waste, and we are not putting our putting our focus on how to manage the solid waste in our world or on our earth, so that percentage of 70% could be not a milestone to reach out. Another major issue is waste dumping. So waste dumping is, we just put hold on the cans and throw over the roads or over the ground. So this is the waste dumping. It could be directly over the surface or into the water, over the land. So but this is also a big issue. Okay, so here is a report of municipal solid waste management, which is collected in the duration of 1960 to 2018. So there is, as for 2018, the average person generates over 4.3 to 4.9 pounds of waste per day, and which is about 1.6 to 2.2 pounds more than most of us produce in 1960. So as you can see from the figures, that we are like moving very far from the figures in 1960, just because our world is moving towards the modernization, and we have now new techniques, we have new technologies, we have new strategies to manage, but until now the things are going out of the way. Each year, trash is generated in the form of packaging, the bottles, boxes, cans, grass clippings, furniture, clothing, and many more. We have so many products which actually serve as a solid waste in our world. So that's actually the peak amount, which is calculated during the survey from 1960 to 2018, that how much the peak is going upward. You can see in the graph. So the figure goes up from 1.6 to 4.3 pounds, and it is like for every average person, every single person generate this much amount of solid waste per day. So this is what we need to focus on. Another survey generates an idea about from where we collect the solid waste, or from what are the main sources of solid waste. So the solid waste can be collected from the industrial areas, from mines, from farms, and it could be the solid waste from municipality, the trash, the domestic trash, it could be the hazardous waste or the toxic waste from the laboratories, from the industries, from the organic compounds, from heavy metals, from the radioactive waste. Solid waste is actually it's not like the heavy machinery or heavy like material, but it is actually the things which are not needed in the environment, but still they exist and cause the pollution. So the region with the largest municipality solid waste generation includes East Asia and Pacific region. And China shares the global municipality solid waste with the percentage of 15.55. Another type of solid waste, which is the plastic waste, which is collected in MSW, about 12 contributes about 12%. So e-waste. Now, as the world is moving towards the modernization, and we must know whether it's e-waste. E-waste is actually, it includes our electronic waste, like our laptops, our PCs, our computers, our accessories, our handicaps. So the electronic waste is the fastest growing solid waste. It means it actually comes from the developed countries. I mean, if the person is facing an issue in his or her PC or computer or any like electronic device, or so they just like buy the new one and throw out the previous one, the old one. So this actually this is actually the reason of like making solid waste in a large amount. So 80% can be recycled or reused, which is actually this is the percentage for the e-waste. So 80% can be recycled or reused, in term of like we can collect different parts, separate out different parts from the devices, and we can like reuse them. Despite of reusing the whole device, we can separate out the useful or the working parts of the device, and we can just reuse them. The composition of the e-waste include very valuable metals, high quality plastics, toxic and hazardous pollutants. How the solid waste is transported from one country to another country, it is definitely done by the shipping process. What happens in India and China, they gain the new machineries, new mechanics, new devices for the own use, and then sail out there, or just ship the old devices to the other like developing countries. So this is actually how the solid waste is transferring from one country to another. It is actually the hierarchy process. The developed countries send their waste to the developing countries. It is not like for the e-waste. Actually, we have the same process for other devices, like for the goods, for the toys, for many other things, like the trash. This is actually the trash of the developed countries, which is exported or sold out to the developing countries. So this is one of the way of marketing, or the business deals. We throw away huge amount of useful things and hazardous material. This is actually using the strategy of reduce, reuse, and recycle. About 80 to 90% of hazardous waste produced by the developed countries is actually shipped to the developing countries. US is the largest producer, and it produces about one third of the solid waste, because it is the developed country again, and it shipped out like the solid waste actually shipped out and sell them to the developing countries. Why we need to reduce the solid waste? Because 3/4 of the material are unnecessary and waste of the earth's resources. So we should reduce the solid waste, because it is actually causing pollution over the earth. So huge amount of air pollution is caused by the solid waste. If it contains the hazardous material, the toxic compounds, the poisonous gases, and it also affect greenhouse, and water pollution is also caused by the like solid waste. We can see the solid waste is openly dumped over the land, or in the seas, in the rivers, in the lakes. So this is actually a biggest problem for the developing countries right now. Here you can see the picture. It is not a mountain, it is actually the like garbage or the solid waste collection area in Indonesia. So you can see there's huge mountain of the solid waste collected over there. So this is from where it comes from. It is not transported yet, but it is actually produced by the Indonesian people. So Indonesia population produce about 65 million tons of garbage every day. This is how a very huge amount to produce by a single person. So this leads to as because we don't have enough processes, we don't follow the techniques, we don't follow the science. So we have such kind of mountains of solid waste actually. Here's another picture depicting the solid waste into a river in Indonesia again. So this is actually like very, very depressing and disgusting to say that we just throw solid waste into the rivers, into the lakes, as the water the we also consider, we must consider the lives under the water. We have aquatic life which is highly affected by the solid waste. So when we throw cans, we throw garbage into the river, it actually affect, or maybe the cause of killing of many aquatic animals as well. There's another solid waste discard picture. as you can see, people go to beaches for the for the refreshment, to spend their holidays, to spend their weekends with the family. But what we are seeing that the people are sitting in with the garbage. It is actually like with the garbage, with the solid waste. So who, from where it comes from? It is not coming from the rivers, from the water, but it is actually us who are creating this pollution. Oh, this while while I see this picture, I must put it over there for the presentation. But what you consider this picture is, it is actually the tires. Thousand millions of tires are dumped in Colorado. Like, it is one of the example of open dump over the land. So this is like, we can reuse the tires, but it is actually like exposing up over the land to cause the pollution. You can see this, how much area this solid waste covered. So we can reduce these type of materials to reduce solid waste, and we can use this land for the better reasons. 100 millions of discarded tires in a dump in Coronado. So what are the effects of waste dumping? It causes definitely soil pollution, air pollution, the pollution of oceans, and pollutions of groundwater. So if, as you can see in the previous picture, it is totally the pollution of land, like soil pollution. We can use this land, this bigger area of land, for the better place. We can construct the schools, we can construct any of the any of the small unit for the better place. But now it is totally occupied by the solid waste of tires, which is actually a rubber. It causes air pollution, definitely, if we are burning the solid waste over the land and it is like totally exposed open air. So it definitely causes pollution in our environment, in our air. And the toxic substances or in the material also cause pollution, air pollution. So I have mentioned already about the ocean, pollution in oceans, pollution in lakes, pollution in seas. It's 13 million tons of plastic ended up in the world ocean every year. So this is how we just throw up the cans or in the rivers, in the oceans, we without like considering that we are actually polluting our own environment. And pollution of groundwater is about 280 million tons of groundwater is being polluted every year. So from these figures, you can consider like how much we are in downfall. So we face many of the diseases which are not reported yet, but still we have the issues of diseases. So this is because of the pollution. This is because of our air is polluted, our land is polluted, our oceans, our water is polluted. Another slide showing the solid waste in United States. Leader in solid waste, which is actually a problem. Leader in trash production by weight, by person. And it is about 98.5% of solid waste which is produced in United States comes up from actual source of from the industries. From mining, it is about 76%. From agriculture, we collect 13% of solid waste, and that of industry is 9.5%. So what is thrown away? What we actually throw away? We actually throw the materials which we can reuse or recycle. The solid waste contain about 31% of paper and cardboards, about 13% of yard waste, about 13% of food waste, about 12% of plastic, and that of 8% for the metals. So these are things that we can reuse, we can reduce, we can recycle, but we just throw away the material as a solid waste in order to make pollution over the land. Here's another picture showing the total and per capita production of municipal waste in the United States. You can see from where the peaks are coming and where it is falling off. So now the last portion of my presentation is the solutions actually for which we are here. We are here to focus about the solid waste, what is the solid waste, from where it comes from, and what are the possible solutions and how the science is working to cope up these issues. So the most easiest and most reliable way we can burn or bury the solid waste to produce less of it. This is actually a term of like dumping the solid waste, but burying the solid waste also cause pollution in our environment. We can deal with solid waste in two ways: by the waste management, we can reduce the harms of the products, but without like minimizing the amounts. Or we can go with the waste reduction process, which is actually use less and focus on reuse, recycle, and composite processing for the solid waste. So for these processes, we have integrated waste management society, which is actually working to deal with the solid waste. There are some of the strategies to manage the solid waste. There are definitely the reduce, restructure, redesign waste collection, bags, and the graving process, which are actually the dumping process. So this is the most simplest and easiest and most reliable way. And this is, unfortunately, this is what we are reading, we are focusing on from many years, but until now we have solid waste as a big issue. So for what we can do for to manage the solid waste, we can simply reuse, reduce, and recycle, or restructure, redesign the composite materials to generate a new thing from the existing material. So yeah, here it is. Here is my major focus of like discussion: reduce, reuse, and recycle. What actually reduce means, it is actually the lowering the amount of waste that is produced. Reuse is actually reusing the material repeatedly. About we can run counter of cycles to reuse the material. We can go with the process of recycling by using the materials and make the new products. We can also go with the recovery of actually recovering the engine energy from the solid waste. Or we can go with the landfill, which is the safe disposal of waste to the land. Not like that I have shared in Colorado, the like the open dumping of the tires. So these are the arts which actually contribute to the world, or the to the environment, to serve and to make it a better place for living. Reduce is the best way to manage the waste, which is not actually producing it to, but it actually means we need to limit our requirements, limit our needs, and limit our requirements for the daily life in order to limit the production of solid waste. Reuse is again an important way to reduce solid waste, pollution, and also a process of saving money. Reuse, we can clean and use material over and over. Definitely, there is no flaw in using the material again and again. So this is also another technique to cope up with the emerging issue of solid waste. Recycle. So I have mentioned earlier, that the major part of like the waste we are collecting as a solid waste in mostly include of paper and plastic. So here is this the slide mentioning that how we can recycle the paper and how we can recycle the plastics. So the production of paper versus recycled paper energy, it requires energy use. It also use water and pollution. So the country that lead recycling efforts with paper recycling leaders at the Denmark's with the percentage of 97, whereas South Korea is doing paper recycling with the percentage of 77 or all over the world. Germany ranked with 72%, and Sweden is coping up this issue with the percentage of 55. So the replacement of fluorine bleaching based chemicals, this is another solution what we can do to reduce the pollution due to paper. Here on the other side, we have plastic recycling. Plastic composed of resins created from oil and natural gas. So most of this is discarded, and about 4% only is recycled. So we must cope up these issues. The plastic recycling is one of the major issues, as we have seen in the picture. Like, we dispose the plastics, we dispose the materials over the land or in the water. So that type of solid waste is mainly of the consist of the plastic. So yeah, here is how integrated waste management work. We collect the raw material, we manufacture. Like, this is actually we need to do. We need to understand the process and things, and we need to put the things accordingly. So this is the only way to manage the waste and this issue, emerging issue. Integrated waste management also have some of the priorities, like the first priority, second and third. The first priority of is like, we must like deal with ourselves to lower the use of the material which actually cause the pollution. The second priority, definitely, if we have the material, we must go with the R's of waste management, which are actually the reuse, repair, recycle, reduce. And the last priority is the waste management, which is actually to bury the waste or to release the waste into the environment, or dilution to treat the waste to reduce the toxicity. So the first priority is, I think, the best and the simplest, that we use. We must reduce the use of harmful products and the material that actually cause the solid waste. And yeah, here it is. The science focus on the bioplastics. Bioplastics can produce significantly fewer greenhouse gas emission than the traditional plastics over the lifetime, because as we have read so many times, and we actually know that plastic is non-degradable and it stays the same over a million of years. So bioplastic is another like technique or a process that is designed by this to cope up the issue of solid waste. Actually, the benefits of using bioplastic is it is cheaper, it is biodegradable, it is lighter, and it is much stronger, but it causes less harm to our environment. How we can what we can do to cope up with the trash, with the kitchen waste or kitchen trash. So we must create the composter drum or outside the kitchen to convert the bacteria, to convert the waste into the compost. So yeah, this is the biggest invention. We must do that to reduce the use of to reduce the solid waste of kitchen. Another thing is to waste the to manage the energies actually by using the waste. So we can generate energy by using the waste in different ways. Definitely there are the techniques, there are the procedures, but just giving up the overview, like we can generate the electricity from the waste. We can like we can wet scrub. We can we can have the wet scrubbers. We can electrostatic precipitators. We can use the precipitators, the generators, to generate electricity and to manage the waste over the plants. And yes, this is finally my last slide, and the takeaways from my presentation is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So the biggest issue of solid waste management can be coped up by using the correct knowledge, by knowing the things. By many of the people don't know actually the meaning of why we have different colors of the bins, the cans, or the we see the baskets putting over on the roads, but we actually don't know for what purpose they are there. So we have different colors representing the specific material that will be like feasible for the municipality to collect the waste and to put it over the right place. We have red we have the red basket showing the collection of plastic. We have the blue one showing the collection of paper. We have the yellow one to show the paper of, to show the collection of cans. Here in the picture, in the last picture, you can see we have purple for the collection of metals, and so on. We have different colors representing the collection of different materials to figure them out and to put them over the right place. So yeah, here's finally I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you very much everyone for listening, and here's the final takeaway from my presentation is to like focus on the solid waste and to focus on reduce, reuse, and recycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salia. That was great, and it really seems like there's a common theme strung through all of these presentations on just taking ownership of the amount of things that we consume. The consumption rate really seems to be what needs to decrease, and yeah, obviously. We went a little bit over time, so we aren't going to have time to do the panel, but we did get all the questions asked or answered in the Q&A boxes. Thank you for taking care of that for the panelists. And we do have a happy hour meeting coming up, so it's more of like an interactive space where we can talk a little bit more about this, like the different questions and stuff like that. There were a couple that were very good about efficiency in schools, the why seaweed. I was excited to hear about why seaweed. Yeah, so please join us over there. Actually, I'm going to drop the link in the chat because yesterday I had a little bit of a mix up with that. So I'll drop that in the chat now. And then yeah, I'll let the speakers kind of come on and say their goodbyes, and then hopefully we'll see you all over in the happy hour to discuss a little bit more about this.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Unfortunately, I don't think I can make the happy hour because I have to still take a COVID test today and take the train down to Miami and order lots of other things and organize other things for our trial we have going on in the Caribbean soon. But it was super nice to be here, and I wish everybody a happy Earth Day and lots of fun today in nature and talking to people about Earth.
Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you Jin and Salia for organizing this, coordinating the entire event. I think it's excellent coming together on Earth Day, and look forward to talking with all of you again.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you everyone for joining and for listening, for bearing us, because these are the like major issues what we are focusing on and what is actually happening on our earth. So the best way is to try to serve our world. Each single person can bring up a big change, a new innovation. So be an activist, be a social worker, be a single person who can bring change in the world. So this is actually what we are in need of. Thank you very much. We have another day for the beautiful presentation, for full of learning sessions. So don't miss out, and looking forward to see you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, today was the science. So tomorrow we have some solutions speakers who are going to be talking about different tactics to take to work on mitigating the issues that we're seeing. And yeah, we're very excited. So see you all hopefully at the happy hour, if not tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.